African time, and we're going to be kickstarting the show with a very, very concerning state of affairs. There's been a wave of concern that's spreading across Durban. This is because of Islamophobic graffiti that was discovered on walls and signposts, including at a mosque. And it raised, I think, alarms over hate speech, over religious intolerance, and just general social cohesion here in South Africa. And joining us now is the chairperson of the South African Muslim Network, SAMNET, Dr. Faisal Suliman, who'll be helping us unpack the impact of this incident and also to give us their reaction as a civil society of what they have observed out of Durban, and if there can be any kind of recourse for things like that, things like these, if they do happen. And Dr. Suliman is joining us via our virtual platform. Doc, Jazakallah so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on News and Views. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
No, the pleasure is all ours. I think we'll jump right into it. What was your immediate reaction when you first learned about these Islamophobic graffiti, writings appearing across Durban?
Yeah, I should point out that although this one was so graphically illustrated, there have been quite a few incidents of bigoted attacks on Muslims, Islamophobic attacks over the years, including, the killing of a few years ago of someone in a food franchise. I think it was in Ramadan, if I remember correctly. And SAMNET gets reports quite often of what we would call minor offenses, or, one would assume minor in the sense that it would be women that are harassed, school teachers that show particularly bigoted behavior towards Muslims in schools, Muslim pupils, etc. But to this one, when I saw those pictures, the motive is what interests us. Why is this happening? Is it someone who just is the business deal gone wrong and suddenly hates all Muslims? Is it someone who was treated badly by Muslims? Or is this part of a greater orchestrated attempt to now besmirch the Muslim name in the public domain? And that's the more concerning one. The others, obviously not pleasant, but of a more personal nature, in the sense that someone could be just one person ticked off at a Muslim, or whatever, went to a church, or went to a mosque, or asked for a donation, whatever, beggar on the street, or right, and that is just a single individual with a personal grudge, and that happens to everybody, and I'm sure it happens, but of course expressed very vividly in this case. It's the other one that is the more concerning one, and there are, we can discuss why that would be the other case. And maybe we can discuss that. As far as this one goes, we were quite happy to see that the CPF immediately took action, removed this graffiti, went and started trying to find the perpetrator. And when the perpetrator is found, then clearly the motive must be established. More importantly, the full extent of the law or charges must be pressed against this individual. Let's not forget, just few years ago, a Muslim family was attacked in Beria, and that person, I think, the attacker is in the psychiatric institute, and the woman was killed, husband and daughter severely attacked, and that was during the previous attacks on Gaza, and this was a pro-Palestinian family attacked by this Christian man, their neighbor. So those were the severe forms. And then we've had during Ramadan, haven't we, Muslims attacked outside mosques and pigs' heads dropped at masjids in the past. Huge campaigns to block masjids from being constructed in previously white suburbs. And most of the time, the motive is this fear of Islam, this fear or this stopping the growing influence. We also must recognize that there are forces in South Africa that have to besmirch the Muslim name. And I think I would trace it back. My own opinion is that it goes back
mm,
to Zionists, to the Zionist influence, to the Christian Zionist influence, and the need. Just like during apartheid, you had to demonize black people, you had to caricature them, you had to reduce them to the image of nothingness, so that you could justify what you were doing to them, whether it was the Roy Khafar, the Swart Khafar, whether
mm,
it was cartoons, etc. The same has been done now to since the advent of the Crusades, on a broader platform, but certainly from about 1890, when the Zionist agenda started to demonize Arabs, Palestinians, and Islam, all one package, and that has grown in intensity since 1948, with the oil embargoes or those wars, 9/11, and now again, with the attacks on Iran. You have to have these caricatures. You have to have people think of whether it's Iranians now, Palestinians for the past 80, 90 years, etc., as less than human. Most obvious one, if anyone's watched a Western movie from the 1970s, 80s, how Red Indians were caricatured, so that, in these movies, to justify what was, annihilating them. So you have this, and I think with South Africa's stance on Palestine, not perfect, especially in terms of trade, but political stance with the ICJ, South Africa initiating the ICJ case, etc., against the genocide in Gaza. The Christian Zionist movement has to now find a way of demonizing Muslims, demonizing Palestinians, but Muslims in South Africa in general, because in the past, and I must admit, sadly, it is changing for various reasons. You had huge
mm,
support from the majority black population in South Africa for Palestine. That clearly is changing. One just has to monitor mainstream media and the media and comments on various podcasts to see that. And it is by no means, um, random. It's orchestrated. It is funded. The trolls, people paid to have these comments. Media agencies engaged, and this is the bigger worry for us. That agenda behind the growing Islamophobic motive. Um, Churches being brainwashed with Christian Zionism, being told that Islam is the enemy, and therefore you have to now start working against that. And I think you'll see a growing pattern here. And
mm.
of course, we have to take this very seriously and apply our resources to fighting it.
And I think you mentioned quite something very, very important. The fact that this could be a well coordinated, well orchestrated scenario. How scary is that state of affairs? The fact that you would have, as you mentioned, organizations, some sects in South African society who would go this route to publicly try, as you mentioned, demonize the Muslim population, try and, make them out as evil and unpalatable characters within the South African society. Because I was reading some of the billboards or boards, if I can call it that, and that seems it was the intention essentially.
Oh, yes, one of the most glaring examples is if you look at Gayton McKenzie, our Minister of Sport, leader of the Patriotic Alliance, and some of the other black political parties. But I'll use Gayton because of his prominence and position. Here you have a colored man who grew up during apartheid, in a society where coloreds and Muslims, Christian coloreds, Malays, Muslim coloreds, etc., would have grown up together and known each other pretty well. For him to come out and be as virtually openly Islamophobic, 150% supportive of Palestine. Then you have Kenneth Meshwe from the ACDP. You have other smaller political parties, and then I'm not even going to go down the route of the Freedom Front Plus and that lot, because racism seems to be in their genes, and it's just another form of Islamophobia, or joining up with Israel is another form of their mentality. you can see, on a broader scale, the sort of AfriForum, particularly what they've done with the ex-South Africans like Trump and Thiel and all of them, to protect this image of genocide against Afrikaners in the United States and joining up with the mega crowd. So here's a glaring example of political parties who existed, or in ACGP's time, Mashwe's example, during apartheid, know right from wrong, should know their own scripture, and yet align themselves with the I mean, you have your Chief Justice Mogoeng, telling him God says you can never not support Israel in the Bible, etc. So this combination of religious fervor, and we had it, didn't we, during apartheid with the NG Kerk as well, religious fervor, political opportunism, and now an orchestrated campaign, and the Zionists aren't hiding it. There's new formations every day in support of Israel, and funding, huge funding for this. I think that is the one part that has to be clear. There's huge funding for this, to drive this agenda. We have a soft coup going on in South Africa because they've made it clear. Ramaphosa also stands in their way. They needed a more pliable president, who will put an end to the ICJ, who will stop Hamas from coming to South Africa as they were in the past, etc. So to answer your question, it is an extremely concerning problem. It is one that the Zionists or the Christian Zionists, you have from the Bible Belt in the States, openly funding churches that align themselves. Their joint projects like farming and etc. between them, and for example in the northern Natal with the IFP, another example of a political party that you think would know better, but openly supportive. You've had the famous Zilla saying genocide is a big word. You've had the DA that has been the political cover in Parliament of Israel, all of these last, in its different forms, DA, PFP, etc., in its different forms for the past 50, 60 years. So these forces are aligning, and you can add to that the RSS, the Hindu right wing, who see Muslims and Islam as the common enemy for various reasons, some of it religious, some of it political, but nonetheless the result the same, a right-wing sort of neo-fascist coalition. And the Muslim community, I must admit, is still on firefighting mode. We don't have the resources for proactive mode, and I think that's where the fault line is.
I want to talk about what would be the appropriate reaction, from the Muslim community right now, because this could easily be, a bait to almost have people inflamed, angry, and react in, ways that could, quote unquote, prove a point to whoever, put those boards up. So what would be the correct way to respond to this, to not fall into the trap of these stereotypes that people already have about the Muslim community?
I think one is we have to stick to the extent of the law, and maybe that's a weakness, but one that, because it's like what you see happening in the Middle East, with Iran's negotiations, etc. They try to work within the law, international law, maritime law, whatever it is, and the enemy does everything the opposite way. And I think it would be tempting for some to want to get into tit for tat mode. I think we must not do that. I think our responses must be confined to what is legal, and more importantly, as Muslims and believers in the Quran, of what is right. That does not mean that you sit back and absorb this. The problem, just to use a bad example, I guess, Golda Meir famously said, when this Israeli, can't remember the time now, walked into the Al-Aqsa Mosque and he burnt Salahuddin's pulpit, right? And she said, I thought the next morning the Arab states would be at our borders. When he killed Palestinians, he walked in and killed Palestinians and did all of those things. And when nothing happened, I knew then that nothing we had a free pass. It appears the Islamophobes here and these people seem to have think they have a free pass because two Muslims have been killed, attacked, beaten, and we've always said, we need a measured response. We don't need to resort to violence, etc. And that is true. We cannot and shouldn't be advocating for anything that breaks the law, nor something that is a tit for tat, just reactionary. However, you ask what can we do. So it depends how broad you want to go. We can go from what SAMNET has initiated a few years ago, called the Mosque Open Day. Invite people to mosques, and it shouldn't be confined. I mean, the Mosque Open Day, SAMNET did it was just because of the public holiday Heritage Day, but this should be a quarterly event. This should be a situation where there's open time at every mosque. The ulama, the alims, the resident imam has to be trained and say, for example, it must be known in the town, it must be known in Santon that the imam is available for the public to go and answer questions every Tuesday from 10 to 12 or 11 to 12. You want to know something, you can pitch up at this mosque and they'll be happy. There'll be someone there to we said before Ramadan, or just at the beginning of Ramadan, we thought it was an excellent idea to invite the press, to invite the local leaders in the community to come watch an iftar. To come and sit down in the masjid, just sit down and watch that a stranger, any person, you could be a millionaire sitting next to someone who's a motorbike rider, a foreigner, often come and sit down next to each other, eat from the same plate of food, break their fast, go stand in a line next to each other and pray. Doesn't matter, the front row isn't reserved according to your wealth, your donations, and your race and whatever. And we thought that was one of the ways of both the media, both the community leaders, etc. And then you do obviously public ones. But to look at that, to have these, that is at the one level. Of course, the other goes to the extent of having whether it's public meetings, whether it's public fora and inviting neighbors, etc., just to like a evening and religious discussion, improving our relationships with inviting and going to speak at churches, inviting church leaders who have the sort of the right political and religious intentions, more importantly religion, to come and speak at a mosque once in a while, to build these relationships. And then of course comes the law part, the carrot and the stick. The carrot being all of these activities, engaging with journalists, etc., like the other communities do. And then the stick part has to be known, that the smallest infringement won't be left. That one of the reasons the reporters, etc., don't take on Israel, are very cautious about skirting around the genocide and what they say, because of this threat of being taken to court and being called anti-Semitic, and it's called lawfare, right? Using the law for warfare, lawfare. And I think that is where we need to strengthen that no incident. And on that, I should, SAMNET has always had a hate crime register where we document these things. And we want to, hoping to work with the various ulama bodies and masjid trustees to have a little poster in the mosque, so that when these things happen, no matter how small, they can be reported to the SAMNET office. We can document them, check that it is genuinely an Islamic phobic thing, or was it something on a personal level. We mustn't fall into the trap of crying wolf, taking every small thing and then turning it into Islamophobic. That too we must be very cautious about, because then you lose credibility. It has to be really based, something that is genuinely Islamophobic, etc. Not a business deal gone wrong and suddenly you call the other person Islamophobic. The sort of anti-Semitic. I mean, right and wrong have always to be clearly defined. So those are other examples. So, for example, our engagement on the hate crimes register with other groups, the reporting mechanism, and then that documenting this. And one of the things the Zionists are very good at, the Jewish community, ensuring that the state pays for their protection, that the state gives them extra resources, whether it is, sometimes I think it could be little false flag ones, a little one figure at a synagogue, and then suddenly, it reaches the cabinet, it reaches the minister of safety, security, police, etc., and suddenly, there's extra police patrols, extra protection, and I think we need to document this so that we can go to the commissioner of police. At the moment, that in itself, you don't know who's going to be arrested and who's not.
No, most definitely. Dr. Faisal,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we have run out of time, but really, really appreciate your time and for giving those important notes. I think this is a story to definitely follow up on, and hope we chat again soon. Salam.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
There we go. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. News and views will be back after this.